The year that refused to be wasted. The clock did not care about excuses. It ticked the same way for the rich and the poor, the focused and the distracted, the dreamers and the doers. Every second that passed was gone forever, never to return. Most people never noticed this truth until years slipped through their hands like sand. But on this particular morning, one man noticed. His name was Daniel Harper, and he sat alone at his kitchen table staring at a calendar. Another year was almost over. The same goals were written in his notebook, untouched. The same dreams whispered quietly in his mind, ignored by daily habits. He felt a familiar heaviness in his chest, not because life was cruel, but because he knew something painful. Nothing outside of him was holding him back. Luck had not failed him. Other people had not blocked his path. The real enemy sat quietly within him. Indecision. Unclear goals. A mind filled with doubt instead of direction. That realization hit harder than any failure ever had. Daniel had always believed that one day motivation would arrive like a lightning strike. One day he would wake up ready. One day circumstances would be perfect. One day success would come knocking. But now he saw the truth clearly. Success never knocks. It responds. It responds to action taken daily. It responds to clear purpose. It responds to a disciplined mind. This moment became his turning point. He realized something powerful. Time was not waiting for him to feel confident. The clock was moving forward whether he acted or not. And if another year passed without change, the responsibility would be his alone. That morning, Daniel made a choice. Not a resolution. A revolution in the way he thought. Napoleon Hill once taught that success begins with a definite purpose. Not a wish. Not a hope. A clear and burning desire that refuses to fade. Daniel had never truly defined his purpose. He drifted through life like a ship without a compass, working hard but going nowhere. He decided that would end today. He picked up a pen and stared at a blank page. The silence felt heavy. For the first time, he asked himself a question he had avoided for years. What do I truly want? Not what sounds safe. Not what others expect. Not what feels easy. What do I want my life to look like 1 year from now? At first, his mind resisted. Doubt whispered that it was too late. Fear reminded him of past failures. But Daniel remembered another truth. Every great achievement begins in the mind. Thoughts are seeds. Whatever is planted consistently will grow. So he wrote anyway. He wrote about the man he wanted to become. Disciplined. Focused. Confident. He wrote about the work he wanted to do. Meaningful. Purpose-driven. Impactful. He wrote about financial freedom, strong health, and inner peace. As the words filled the page, something changed inside him. The fog began to lift. For the first time in years, his future felt real. This is the power of a clear purpose. Most people wander through life reacting instead of directing. They repeat the same habits and expect different results. Without a definite goal, days blur together and years disappear. But when purpose is clear, every day has meaning. Daniel understood now why so many people remain stuck. Without direction, effort is wasted. Energy scatters. Motivation fades. But purpose acts like a magnet. It pulls actions into alignment. Napoleon Hill told the story of Edwin C. Barnes, a man who desired to work with Thomas Edison. Barnes had no money, no connections, and no guarantee of success. But he had something far more powerful. A definite purpose. Barnes did not wish to work with Edison. He decided to. He held that vision so clearly in his mind that failure had no permanent place. He persisted until opportunity appeared. His clarity shaped his reality. Daniel saw himself in that story. He realized that desire alone was not enough. Desire must be organized into action. Dreams must be written, reviewed, and acted upon daily. A goal that lives only in the mind is easily forgotten. A goal written on paper becomes a command. That afternoon, Daniel placed his written purpose where he could see it every morning. He promised himself he would read it daily. Not casually. Intentionally. He also understood something else. Purpose creates resilience. When challenges appear, people without purpose quit. People with purpose adapt. Obstacles become lessons instead of walls. Failure becomes feedback instead of defeat. Daniel knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be days of doubt. moments of fear, times when progress felt slow. But his vision was now stronger than his excuses. Purpose simplified his decisions. If an action moved him closer to his goal, it stayed. If it distracted him, it went. This clarity eliminated confusion. His time became intentional. His effort became focused. As night fell, Daniel felt something he had not felt in a long time. Calm confidence. Not because success had arrived, but because direction had. He understood that 1 year lived with purpose could change everything. The next 12 months would not be left to chance. They would be shaped by intention. Before sleeping, he reflected on a final truth. The mind is the starting point of all achievement. Every result begins as a thought. Negative thinking creates limitation. Positive, disciplined thinking creates opportunity. Success is attracted by belief backed by action. Daniel committed to mastering his mindset. He would guard his thoughts. Replace doubt with belief. Replace fear with faith. Replace waiting with doing. This was only the beginning. The journey ahead would demand discipline, persistence, and courage. But with a clear purpose guiding him, Daniel knew one thing with certainty. The year ahead would not be wasted. And neither would his life. If you want, I can now continue with part 2, focusing on self-discipline and daily habits, while keeping the same Napoleon Hill story style and tone. Part 2: The battle inside the mind. The most dangerous enemy Daniel Harper ever faced did not live outside him. It did not have a face or a voice others could hear. It lived quietly in his thoughts. It whispered doubt when he tried to move forward. It questioned his ability when he imagined success. It reminded him of past failures whenever he felt hope rising. For years, this enemy controlled his direction without him even realizing it. Daniel used to believe that success depended on talent, luck, or perfect timing. But as he studied the lives of successful men and women, a powerful truth emerged. Every outcome begins in the mind. Before success appears in the world, it is first created in thought. Napoleon Hill called the mind the master workshop where all plans are shaped. Daniel now understood why two people with the same opportunities could end up with completely different lives. One believed in possibility. The other believed in limitation. Their results followed their thoughts faithfully. That morning, Daniel paid close attention to his inner dialogue. He noticed how often his mind spoke in fear. You are not ready. You might fail. What will people think? These thoughts had become so familiar that he mistook them for truth. But they were not truth. They were habits. He realized something that changed everything. Thoughts can be challenged. Thoughts can be replaced. Thoughts can be trained. Successful people are not free from doubt. They simply refuse to let doubt take control. Daniel began studying the habits of high achievers. He noticed that they guarded their minds fiercely. They chose what they listened to, who they spent time with, and what ideas they allowed to shape them. They treated the mind like fertile soil. Whatever was planted would grow. For years, Daniel had unknowingly fed his mind fear and negativity. News filled with chaos. Conversations filled with complaints. Internal criticism that never rested. No wonder his motivation felt weak. So he made a deliberate decision. He would begin feeding his mind differently. Each morning, instead of reaching for distractions, he read words that strengthened him. He listened to voices that spoke of possibility instead of limitation. He repeated affirmations that reminded him of his potential. At first, it felt uncomfortable. His old thoughts fought back. Doubt did not surrender easily. But Daniel persisted. Napoleon Hill taught that repetition is the key to influencing the subconscious mind. A thought repeated often enough becomes belief. A belief acted upon becomes reality. Slowly, Daniel noticed a shift. His inner voice changed tone. Fear grew quieter. Confidence spoke more often. He did not suddenly become fearless, but he became braver. He also noticed how his environment affected him. Certain conversations drained his energy. Certain people reinforced his doubts without meaning to. They spoke from their own fears and limitations. Daniel realized that staying around constant negativity was like trying to build strength while breathing poison. So he chose his influences carefully. He sought people who challenged him to think bigger. He limited exposure to voices that discouraged growth. This was not arrogance. It was discipline. Just as the body needs healthy food, the mind needs healthy ideas. Daniel filled his evenings with books that expanded his thinking. He wrote down lessons that inspired him. He visualized the life he wanted as if it already existed. He imagined success vividly, allowing his subconscious mind to accept it as familiar. Visualization became a powerful tool. Each night before sleep, he pictured himself acting with confidence. He saw himself making decisions without hesitation. He imagined obstacles appearing and himself overcoming them calmly. Over time, his actions began to reflect his thoughts. But there was still one powerful enemy left: waiting. Daniel realized how many years he had lost waiting for the right time. Waiting to feel confident. Waiting for conditions to improve. Waiting for fear to disappear. The truth struck him hard. Fear never disappears before action. It fades after action. Most people live under the illusion of perfect timing. They believe that someday everything will align. More money. More experience. More clarity. But that day never arrives. Life does not pause until someone feels ready. Napoleon Hill wrote that procrastination is the most common cause of failure. Not lack of ability. Not lack of opportunity. Delay. Daniel saw how procrastination had disguised itself as preparation in his life. He told himself he was planning when he was actually avoiding risk. Successful people do not wait for certainty. They move forward in uncertainty. Daniel decided to test this truth. He took a small action toward a goal he had delayed for years. It was not perfect. It was not impressive. But it was movement, and something unexpected happened. Momentum appeared. With each small step, confidence grew. With each imperfect attempt, clarity increased. The fear he once magnified in his mind began to shrink. He realized confidence is not a requirement. It is a reward. The more he acted, the more capable he felt. The more capable he felt, the more action he took. A powerful cycle replaced the old pattern of doubt and delay. Daniel also reframed failure. Instead of seeing it as proof of weakness, he saw it as instruction. Every mistake revealed what did not work. Every setback sharpened his approach. The most successful individuals were not those who avoided failure. They were those who learned from it quickly. Waiting suddenly felt dangerous. Daniel understood that another year could easily pass if he returned to hesitation. Time was neutral. It rewarded action and punished delay equally. He made a rule for himself. No more waiting for perfect conditions. He would act with what he had. Where he was. He stopped saying someday and replaced it with today. The illusion of needing more time vanished. He saw clearly that time was never the issue. Priority was. When something truly mattered, action followed. Fear still appeared, but Daniel now saw it differently. Fear was no longer a stop sign. It was a signal that growth was nearby. Every time fear appeared, Daniel asked himself a simple question. What would happen if I moved forward anyway? More often than not, the result was progress. By changing his thoughts, Daniel changed his actions. By changing his actions, he changed his direction. By changing his direction, he changed his future. He understood now that the mind can be either a prison or a launch pad. That choice belonged to him. And for the first time in his life, Daniel felt in control. The journey was far from over. But the waiting was done. If you want, I can now continue with part 3, focusing on discipline, daily habits, and consistency, while maintaining the same Napoleon Hill-inspired story style. Part 3: The courage to step forward. Fear knocked on Daniel Harper's door early that morning. It did not arrive loudly. It came quietly, disguised as logic. It told him to slow down. To wait a little longer. To think things through one more time. Fear had visited him many times before, and for years, Daniel had obeyed it without question. But something was different now. Daniel had begun to notice a pattern. Every meaningful breakthrough in his life had happened only after fear appeared. Fear always stood at the edge of change, guarding the doorway to growth. The longer he hesitated, the stronger fear became. It fed on imagination, creating worst-case scenarios that felt real but were rarely true. Then Daniel remembered a powerful truth he had recently learned. Fear loses its power the moment action is taken. He decided to test it. There was a decision he had been avoiding for months. It felt risky. Uncomfortable. Uncertain. His old self would have delayed it again. But this time, he acted. The moment he took that first step, something unexpected happened. Fear weakened. His heart still raced, but confidence quietly followed. He realized that fear did not disappear. It simply became manageable. Napoleon Hill wrote that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Daniel finally understood that he had believed for years that successful people were fearless. Now he saw the truth. They simply acted anyway. They did not wait for fear to leave. They moved forward with fear beside them, knowing it would shrink with every step. Failure had always frightened Daniel more than fear itself. He saw failure as proof that he was not good enough. But as he studied the lives of great achievers, his definition of failure changed. Failure was not the opposite of success. It was part of it. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. Walt Disney faced rejection and ridicule before building an empire. These men were not immune to fear or failure. They simply refused to let either define them. Daniel realized that quitting makes failure permanent. Persistence turns it into instruction. Each setback carried a lesson. Each mistake revealed a better way forward. Those who avoided failure also avoided growth. Those who embraced it advanced. He also noticed something else. Fear thrived in isolation. When Daniel spent too much time alone with his doubts, fear grew louder. When he shared ideas with the wrong people, it grew stronger. Negative voices reinforced hesitation. They normalized excuses and discouraged ambition. Daniel began paying close attention to the people around him. Some friends meant well but constantly complained. Others doubted every bold idea. They spoke more about problems than solutions. Without realizing it, Daniel had been absorbing their mindset. Napoleon Hill emphasized the power of association. A person becomes the average of the people they spend the most time with. Daniel understood why this mattered so deeply. He made a bold decision. He would upgrade his environment. He sought out people who talked about goals instead of gossip, progress instead of problems, action instead of excuses. He connected with mentors through books, lectures, and communities. He joined groups where growth was expected, not questioned. At first, he felt uncomfortable. Being around ambitious people exposed his own limitations. But instead of shrinking, he rose. Success was contagious. The discipline, confidence, and energy of others began influencing his own behavior. Accountability replaced procrastination. Encouragement replaced doubt. Daniel also learned the value of mentorship. A mentor shortened the distance between where he was and where he wanted to be. Advice from someone who had already walked the path saved him years of trial and error. He realized that no great achievement is built alone. At the same time, Daniel learned to set boundaries. He did not cut people out harshly. He simply limited exposure to negativity. He protected his mind carefully. Every conversation, every relationship either fueled his growth or drained it. There was no neutrality. Then came the most important lesson of all: daily progress. Daniel had once believed that success required a dramatic breakthrough. A single big moment that would change everything. Now he saw the truth. Success was built quietly, through small daily actions repeated consistently. Napoleon Hill taught that habits shape destiny. Daniel stopped focusing on how far he had to go. He focused on what he could do today. Each day, he committed to one meaningful action. Reading a few pages. Learning a skill. Reaching out to someone valuable. Improving his health. Moving one step closer to his vision. Some days felt powerful. Others felt slow. But progress continued. Momentum began to build. Daniel realized that motivation was unreliable. Some days it showed up. Other days it disappeared. Discipline, however, remained steady. He learned to act regardless of mood. Excuses still appeared. Fatigue. Distractions. Doubt. But Daniel no longer negotiated with them. He acted anyway. One small action led to another. Weeks passed. Then months. The changes became visible. Confidence increased. Skills improved. Opportunities appeared. The compounding effect amazed him. A year earlier, Daniel had waited for change. Now he created it daily. He understood a final truth that anchored everything. 1 year from now, life would reflect today's habits. If he chose comfort, stagnation would follow. If he chose discipline, growth would follow. Fear still appeared, but it no longer controlled him. Failure still happened, but it no longer stopped him. Other people still doubted, but their voices no longer guided him. Daniel had learned to step forward anyway. He looked at his life with clarity now. Success was not magic. It was not luck. It was not perfect timing. It was courage in small daily actions. It was choosing the right environment. It was committing to progress even when it felt uncomfortable. And Daniel knew something with certainty. The man who acted daily would always defeat the man who waited. The journey continued. But fear was no longer in charge. If you want, I can continue with part 4, focusing on prosperity consciousness, wealth mindset, and eliminating scarcity thinking, while keeping the same Napoleon Hill inspired story style. Part 4, the doorway to prosperity. Prosperity did not arrive in Daniel Harper's life as money. It arrived first as an idea. For years, Daniel believed prosperity was something external. Something controlled by luck, background, connections, or timing. He believed wealth was reserved for a chosen few and that most people were meant to struggle quietly and accept it as normal. That belief shaped his life more than he realized. One evening, as Daniel reviewed his progress, he noticed a pattern. Every time an opportunity appeared, he hesitated. Every time growth required risk, he pulled back. Deep down, he did not truly believe prosperity was meant for him. That realization unsettled him. Napoleon Hill wrote that poverty begins in the mind long before it appears in the bank account. Prosperity works the same way. It begins as a state of consciousness. Daniel saw now that he had been operating from scarcity. Scarcity whispered that resources were limited. That success for others meant less for him. That safety mattered more than growth. That risk was dangerous. Prosperity thinking said something entirely different. It said opportunity is endless. Value creates wealth. Giving and receiving are connected. Growth expands resources rather than depletes them. Daniel understood that until his thinking changed, his results would remain capped. He began studying prosperous individuals more closely. Not just their income, but their mindset. He noticed they expected success. They spoke confidently about the future. They invested in themselves without hesitation. They saw money as a tool, not a measure of worth. Most importantly, they believed abundance was normal. Daniel compared that to his own thinking. He worried about spending on learning. He played small with ideas. He avoided bold moves to protect comfort. Without realizing it, he had been loyal to limitation. Prosperity required courage. That night, Daniel wrote a new belief at the top of his journal. I live in an abundant world and I create value through my actions. At first, the words felt foreign. His old mindset resisted them. But he remembered what he had learned. Repetition shapes belief. Belief directs action. Action determines results. Daniel began practicing prosperity thinking daily. He stopped focusing on what he lacked and started focusing on what he could give. Skills. Effort. Creativity. Solutions. He realized wealth is attracted by value. Money follows usefulness. He asked himself a powerful question each morning. How can I create value today? That single question shifted his behavior. He became more proactive. He looked for ways to solve problems. He improved his skills intentionally. He stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing himself. Daniel also confronted his fear of earning more. He discovered something uncomfortable. Part of him feared responsibility. He feared judgment. He feared standing out. Scarcity felt familiar and safe. Prosperity required him to grow beyond who he had been. Napoleon Hill taught that growth demands the surrender of old identities. Daniel understood that to earn more, he had to become more. He invested in learning without guilt. He paid for books, courses, and experiences that expanded his thinking. Instead of seeing them as expenses, he saw them as seeds. And seeds, when planted consistently, grow. He also changed how he spoke about money. He stopped calling it hard to earn. He stopped saying it was always scarce. Words, he realized, shape belief. Belief shapes action. Daniel began affirming daily that he was capable of prosperity. That wealth was the result of service and discipline. That financial growth was a natural outcome of personal growth. Slowly, opportunities appeared, not magically, logically, because Daniel was now alert. His mind was open to possibilities he had previously ignored. He noticed ideas, connections, needs he could serve. Prosperity had been invisible before because his mindset filtered it out. Now he could see it everywhere. He also learned the importance of faith. Faith was not blind hope. It was confidence rooted in action. Faith meant acting as if success was inevitable while continuing to work diligently. Daniel stopped asking if he would succeed. He asked how he would improve today. Prosperity also demanded patience. Daniel reminded himself that wealth rarely arrives overnight. It accumulates through consistency. Just like habits. Just like confidence, he focused on progress instead of pressure. Another major shift occurred when Daniel stopped comparing himself to others. Comparison fueled scarcity. It made success feel competitive instead of expansive. He realized someone else's success did not reduce his own potential. Abundance thinking welcomed examples of success. It proved what was possible. Daniel began studying those who had achieved what he desired, not with envy, but with curiosity. If they could do it, so could he. Prosperity also required emotional control. Fear, impatience, and desperation drove poor decisions. Daniel learned to operate calmly, thoughtfully, strategically. Prosperous people, he noticed, did not rush out of fear. They moved with confidence. He practiced delayed gratification. Instead of chasing quick rewards, he invested in long-term outcomes. He saved. He reinvested. He built systems. He thought in years, not weeks. This mindset changed everything. Daniel also embraced gratitude. Gratitude anchored him in abundance. It reminded him that he already had resources to build from. Skills, time, health, opportunity. Gratitude multiplied prosperity. The more grateful he became, the more motivated he felt. The more motivated he felt, the more value he created. The more value he created, the more opportunities appeared. Prosperity was no longer mysterious. It was intentional. Daniel understood now that wealth is not about money alone. It is about freedom, choice, impact, growth. Prosperity allowed him to serve more people, create better solutions, build a meaningful life. He no longer feared it. He welcomed it responsibly. As weeks turned into months, Daniel noticed his confidence had changed. He thought bigger. He acted bolder. He trusted himself more. Scarcity had lost its grip. He realized a powerful truth. Prosperity is a decision before it is a result. The moment he chose abundance thinking, his direction changed. The moment he aligned his actions with value creation, results followed. Daniel looked ahead now with certainty. He knew challenges would come. Markets would change. Fear would appear. But his mindset was different. He was no longer chasing prosperity. He was becoming the kind of person prosperity naturally follows. And that made all the difference. If you want, I can now continue with Part 5, focusing on the power of association, mastermind thinking, and building winning relationships, in the same Napoleon Hill story style. Part 5: The Power of the Circle. Daniel Harper did not realize how much his life was being shaped by others until one quiet evening made it painfully clear. He had just left a conversation feeling drained. Nothing terrible had been said. No insults. No arguments. Yet his energy was gone. His excitement faded. His belief weakened. As he sat alone afterward, Daniel asked himself a question that changed everything. Why do I feel smaller after talking to certain people? The answer was uncomfortable. The people he spent the most time with were quietly shaping his limits. Napoleon Hill wrote that no individual rises above the thinking of the group they keep. Daniel had read that line many times, but now he understood it deeply. Success, he realized, is rarely a solo journey. It is built through influence, encouragement, accountability, and shared belief. For years, Daniel had allowed his environment to form by accident. Friends who complained about work. Conversations focused on problems instead of solutions. People who mocked ambition and called discipline unrealistic. None of them were bad people, but they were comfortable with staying the same. Comfort had a powerful gravity. Daniel saw clearly that his environment was not neutral. It was either lifting him or pulling him down. Successful people understood this truth instinctively. They did not leave their circle to chance. They chose it intentionally. Daniel decided to do the same. He began by observing the patterns around him. Some people encouraged growth without realizing it. Others reinforced doubt without intending harm. Words mattered. Attitudes mattered. Expectations mattered. He noticed that ambition thrived in certain rooms and died in others. So Daniel made a commitment. He would build a circle that matched the future he wanted, not the past he was leaving behind. The first shift was internal. Daniel stopped sharing big dreams with people who did not believe in growth. Not because they were wrong, but because their doubts weakened his resolve. He protected his vision carefully. Napoleon Hill taught that a goal must be guarded until it is strong enough to stand alone. Next, Daniel sought new influences. He read books written by people who had built extraordinary lives. He listened to voices that spoke about discipline, responsibility, and persistence. Though he had never met these individuals, their ideas became mentors to him. Then something unexpected happened. As Daniel's thinking changed, his behavior changed. And as his behavior changed, new people began to appear. He joined groups focused on personal development. He attended events that attracted goal-driven individuals. He asked better questions. He listened more. He spoke with intention. At first, he felt like an outsider. These people thought differently. They spoke about goals openly. They discussed failures honestly without shame. They held each other accountable. But instead of shrinking, Daniel leaned in. He realized something powerful. Being around high standards raises your own standards automatically. This was the principle of the mastermind at work. Napoleon Hill described the mastermind as the coordination of knowledge and effort between two or more people toward a definite purpose. When minds unite in harmony, something greater than individual effort emerges. Daniel experienced this firsthand. In conversations with driven individuals, ideas expanded. Problems found solutions. Confidence multiplied. He felt sharper, more focused, more capable. He also noticed accountability appearing naturally. When surrounded by people who acted consistently, excuses felt out of place. Discipline became normal. Growth became expected. Daniel realized that motivation did not need to be forced. It was absorbed. Success was contagious. But just as success spreads, so does stagnation. Daniel looked back at old patterns. Endless complaining. Blaming circumstances. Waiting for luck. He saw how easily he had absorbed those habits before. Environment programs behavior. This realization made Daniel intentional about boundaries. He did not cut people off harshly. He simply chose how much influence they had. He limited time spent in negative conversations. He redirected discussions when possible. He excused himself when energy turned toxic. He learned that protecting growth sometimes requires uncomfortable decisions. One of the most powerful changes Daniel made was seeking mentorship. A mentor, he learned, is not just someone older. It is someone further along the path. Someone who has already solved problems you are facing now. Daniel reached out respectfully. He asked thoughtful questions. He listened carefully. He applied advice immediately. The guidance he received saved him years of trial and error. A mentor showed him what books to read, what mistakes to avoid, what habits truly mattered. Daniel realized that learning from experience is good, but learning from someone else's experience is faster. Mentorship accelerated his growth dramatically. Daniel also became mindful of the influence he had on others. He asked himself another powerful question. Am I lifting the people around me or pulling them down? Growth, he realized, was reciprocal. He began encouraging others. Sharing ideas. Speaking positively. Celebrating effort instead of criticizing failure. As he gave value, he received more. The quality of his relationships improved. Daniel also learned that not everyone would understand his changes. Some people felt threatened. Others felt judged. A few tried to pull him back into old patterns. Daniel stayed respectful but firm. He understood that growth often creates distance before it creates understanding. This did not mean he was better than anyone. It simply meant he was choosing a different direction, and direction matters. Napoleon Hill wrote that the greatest achievements are the result of teamwork and harmony of purpose. Daniel saw now why isolation slowed progress and connection accelerated it. He also realized that surrounding yourself with the right people is not about popularity. It is about alignment, shared values, shared standards, shared discipline. Daniel made a list of the qualities he wanted in his circle. Integrity, growth mindset, accountability, optimism, action orientation. He then worked to become someone worthy of that circle. Because another truth became clear. You attract who you are. As Daniel raised his standards, his environment followed. He no longer felt alone in his journey. He felt supported, challenged, and inspired. When doubt appeared, encouragement followed. When fear surfaced, perspective replaced it. When discipline wavered, accountability restored it. The power of the circle changed everything. Daniel looked ahead and understood something vital. A year from now, his life would reflect the people he spent time with today. If he chose growth-driven relationships, growth would follow. If he returned to comfort-driven circles, stagnation would return. The choice was his. And this time, he chose deliberately. Because success is not built alone. It is built together, with the right minds moving toward the same purpose. If you want, I can now write part 6, final part, focusing on daily discipline, consistency, and turning vision into lifelong success. With a strong conclusion and call to action in the same Napoleon Hill inspired style. Part 6, the year that changed everything. The final test did not come as a dramatic moment. It arrived quietly, disguised as an ordinary day. Daniel Harper woke up before sunrise, just like he had for months. There was no excitement buzzing in the air. No applause. No sudden breakthrough waiting outside his door. Just another morning, another choice, another chance to either act or delay. That was when Daniel realized the truth. This is where most people quit. They expect success to feel exciting every day. They wait for motivation to carry them forward. But motivation fades. Discipline remains. Napoleon Hill taught that success is the result of daily habits consistently applied. Not once. Not occasionally. Daily. Daniel understood now that the greatest enemy of success was not fear or failure. It was inconsistency. For years, Daniel had started strong and faded fast. He relied on inspiration instead of structure. Emotion instead of commitment. Now he saw clearly that lasting success is built when action becomes routine. Discipline was no longer optional. It was the foundation. Daniel stopped asking himself how he felt each day. Instead, he asked what must be done. He treated his goals like appointments that could not be missed. He honored his commitments to himself with the same respect he gave others. Some days were easy. Others were heavy. But Daniel showed up anyway. This is where transformation truly happens. Small actions repeated daily had reshaped his identity. He was no longer trying to be disciplined. He was disciplined. He was no longer chasing success. He was becoming the kind of person success follows. Napoleon Hill wrote that habits are formed through repetition and emotional intensity. Daniel created both. He connected his daily actions to his deeper purpose. Every step mattered because it moved him closer to the life he envisioned. He also learned patience. Progress did not always announce itself. Some days felt stagnant. Some weeks felt slow. But Daniel trusted the process. He understood that results lag behind effort, just like planting seeds. You water the soil daily without seeing anything for a while. Then one day, growth appears. Not because of that single day, but because of all the days before it. Daniel also learned to forgive himself. Perfection was no longer the goal. Consistency was. When he missed a step, he did not quit. He adjusted and continued. Momentum mattered more than guilt. This mindset kept him moving forward. Another powerful realization settled in. Success is not a destination. It is a direction. Daniel stopped measuring himself by outcomes alone. He measured himself by discipline, by effort, by alignment with purpose. This removed pressure and replaced it with confidence. He also noticed how far he had come. The man who once waited was gone. The man who once doubted had quieted. The man who once feared action now welcomed challenge. His thinking had changed. His habits had changed. His environment had changed. His life followed. Opportunities appeared that once felt unreachable. Conversations opened doors. Confidence attracted respect. Value creation attracted reward, not by accident. By design. Daniel understood that 1 year lived intentionally can outperform 10 years lived reactively. And now came the most important choice of all. Would he stop here or continue? Napoleon Hill warned that complacency is success's silent enemy. Many people achieve progress then relax. They drift back into comfort. They lose momentum. Daniel refused to repeat that cycle. He committed to lifelong growth. He decided that learning would never stop. Discipline would never fade. Purpose would never be abandoned. Each year would be built intentionally, one day at a time. Daniel also realized something else. His journey was no longer just about him. His growth influenced others. His discipline inspired. His story carried weight. Responsibility replaced selfish ambition. Success became service. He shared what he learned. Encouraged others to take action. Reminded them that time is precious and waiting is costly. Daniel knew that somewhere, someone was standing at the same crossroads he once stood at. Unsure. Afraid. Hesitant. He wanted them to know the truth. You do not need perfect conditions. You need commitment. You do not need confidence first. You need action. You do not need more time. You need better use of today. As Daniel looked ahead, he felt calm certainty. The future was no longer intimidating. It was intentional. The clock was still ticking. But now, every tick worked in his favor. Because Daniel no longer waited for life to change. He changed daily. And that changed everything. This story is not just Daniel's. It is yours. If you are still waiting, stop. If you are still doubting, act. If you are still hoping someday will come, make today the turning point. One decision. One habit. One disciplined day can begin a new chapter. The year will pass anyway. The only question is who you will become during it. Choose discipline. Choose purpose. Choose action. And let this be the year that changes everything. If this story inspired you, subscribe for more powerful motivation, share it with someone who needs direction today, and comment below what step you are committing to take right now.